So next we're going to look at geography in this section, and there are several PowerPoints that you'll be looking at which look at the different aspects of the ancient world from Egypt in the southwest to Anatolia, or what is modern-day Turkey in the north, the realm of the ancient Hittites and other people groups of that region, and then of course over into Mesopotamia, from Upper Mesopotamia in the realm of the Assyrians, the Mitanni people, the Hurrians, and moving further south, of course, to the Sumerians, the Babylonians, Assyrians, and so forth. And so we'll begin looking at the geography of the ancient world, and then we'll come back and narrow in on that area of the Eastern Mediterranean that we call, in a term coined by the British years ago, called the Levant. That's the Eastern Mediterranean. Today, what is modern-day Syria, particularly the coastal regions of Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine today. And so we'll look at the narrow perspective of the geography of the focal point of the biblical record, that is the land of promise that God promised to Abraham and comes to fruition through Joshua and the conquest narrative. So we'll look at, from the broad perspective of the ancient world, but also that, of course, the New Testament context, which includes everything from Rome and beyond to the west to Damascus and the east. So the broad perspective of ancient geography. We'll also look at climate in this geographical study and understanding, what kind of climate that we see as compared to what is modern day issues of climate and climate change. There was always climate change going on in the ancient world, and that's reflected in the Bible. Periods of drought, periods of plenteous rain, periods of extreme cold, and periods of extreme heat. And so the ever-changing world of the Bible. And one of the issues, of course, that we'll look at in light of this is God's promise to his people to supply their needs with rainfall, with plenteous production of crops, and so forth, if the people were faithful. If the people were unfaithful, he would withhold the rains, as described there in Deuteronomy. And of course, the illustrious story of Elijah comes in the backdrop of the years of drought that he had proclaimed because of the people's unfaithfulness to God and the worship of Baal and Asherah and other Canaanite and Phoenician deities. And so we'll look at the perspective of geography that also has theological implications in it. So the broad perspective of issues of climate, but also water supply, that's part of this process in the nature of God's provision in the Jordan River, and in ancient times for the Nile and the land of Egypt. Without the Nile, Egypt would never have existed. It is, as Herodotus, the famous Greek historian from the later Greek period, described Egypt as the gift of the Nile. And we'll look at the Tigris and Euphrates, and they're very different worlds. The Tigris and Euphrates and the nature of the terrain in which the rivers flow down toward the Persian Gulf is very different from the Nile River. And we'll look at some of those issues of the changing climate through ancient times. Likewise, even in a narrower perspective, the Jordan River emptying into the Dead Sea, the lowest point on the surface of the earth, and this sea that is a catch basin for the varieties of minerals and salts that the Jordan River brings in, particularly in this area south of the Sea of Galilee. So we'll look at the broad perspective of the geography of the Bible, from the broad world of New Testament, Old Testament worlds, down to the focal point of ancient Israel.